Ever pondered if Jesus and Moses went into ketosis during their 40 days and 40 nights in the desert? This question might seem a bit out of left field, but when you really think about it, it combines two fascinating topics: religious history and the human body's incredible ability to adapt. For those who might not be familiar with the term, ketosis is a metabolic state where the body, in the absence of enough carbohydrates, starts burning fat for energy. Now imagine Jesus and Moses wandering the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. Could they have survived this ordeal by entering a state of ketosis? This is not just a question about biology, but also about faith and endurance. So, what do you think? Could these revered figures have used their body's own survival mechanisms to endure their trials in the desert? Let's dive into history and see what we can uncover. To understand this, we need to step back into the times of Jesus and Moses. Picture this: vast, barren landscapes of sand and stone stretching as far as the eye can see. These were the deserts where Jesus and Moses embarked on their spiritual journeys, lasting 40 days and 40 nights, a significant period in biblical lore. In the case of Moses, this journey took place around 1300 years before Christ. This was a time of great turmoil and change for the Israelites. Moses, leading his people out of the bondage in Egypt, found himself in the desolate wilderness of Sinai. Food was scarce, and the Israelites primarily depended on manna, a substance said to be provided by God, which was like coriander seed white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. Fast forward to the 1st century AD, Jesus too found himself in a desert. Following his baptism, Jesus was led into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. For those 40 days and nights, the Bible tells us he fasted and was afterwards an hungered. Now let's think about what fasting means. It's abstaining from eating, right? And the body, ever so intelligent, has a way of adapting to this. When food is scarce, it switches from using glucose for energy to using stored fats. This process is what we now know as ketosis. Consider what this implies for our historical figures. Their diets, by necessity, would have been extremely low in carbs, the body's preferred source of energy. Instead, they would have been eating foods high in fats and proteins, if they were eating at all. Just imagine Moses on Mount Sinai, sustained perhaps by manna, a food low in carbs and high in other nutrients, or Jesus in the wilderness fasting for over a month. It's not unreasonable to think that their bodies might have entered a state of ketosis to survive these harsh conditions. Given these circumstances, could they have gone into ketosis? Let's explore. Before we delve deeper, let's understand what ketosis actually is. Ketosis is a metabolic state where the body, in the absence of sufficient glucose, starts burning fats for energy. It's like your body's survival mechanism kicking in when food is scarce. Let's imagine for a moment. You've been eating regularly, then suddenly you stop. Your body, used to a steady supply of energy, now has to find an alternative. It turns to stored fat. As this fat is broken down, chemicals called ketones are produced, entering your bloodstream and serving as a new energy source. This is the state of ketosis. Now, how does one get into ketosis? There are a few ways, but the most common route is through fasting or a drastic reduction in carbohydrate intake. It's like taking the highway to your body's fat reserves. When you deprive your body of carbohydrates, which are the primary source of glucose, it has no choice but to turn to fats. And here's the interesting part. While ketosis is often associated with weight loss and diets like the ketogenic diet, it's not just about shedding pounds. It can have profound effects on your overall health. Some people report increased energy levels, improved focus, and even relief from certain chronic conditions. It's like giving your body a tune-up, getting it to run more efficiently on a different kind of fuel. However, it's important to note that ketosis isn't for everyone. Just like any dietary change, it can have side effects and risks. It's always best to consult with a healthcare professional before taking the plunge. Now, why are we talking about ketosis in the context of Jesus and Moses? Well, consider their time in the desert, a period of fasting and dietary restriction. Could they have entered a state of ketosis? It's a fascinating question, one that ties together faith, history, and biology. With this understanding, let's now revisit our initial question. There are various theories and interpretations about this. Let us delve into the myriad perspectives that dot this fascinating landscape of thought. The first viewpoint we'll consider is the historical one. Historians who study the time periods and cultures in which Jesus and Moses lived have suggested that their diets likely consisted of simple, plant-based foods. This would include fruits, vegetables, legumes, and grains, with very little meat or dairy. Given this fact, it might seem unlikely that they would have entered a state of ketosis, which typically requires a diet high in fat and low in carbohydrates. However, during their respective periods in the desert, their diets would have been drastically different, potentially allowing for a state of ketosis. Religious interpretations, on the other hand, provide a slightly different perspective. Some theologians argue that during their fasts, Jesus and Moses were sustained supernaturally by God, and thus, the normal rules of human biology may not apply. For them, it is a matter of faith, not of physiological processes. On the scientific side of things, some researchers have posited that it's entirely possible for Jesus and Moses to have entered a state of ketosis. The human body is incredibly adaptable, and when faced with a lack of food, it can switch to burning fat for energy, a process we now know as ketosis. During their 40 days and nights in the desert with little to no food, their bodies would have had to adapt to survive. Then there are those who blend these viewpoints, suggesting a combination of divine intervention and physiological adaptation. They propose that while God could have supernaturally sustained them, he may have also used the natural processes he created, like ketosis, to do so. There's also a group of thinkers who propose a symbolic interpretation. They argue that the number 40 in the Bible often symbolizes a period of testing or judgment. Thus, the focus of these desert wanderings may not be on the physical state of Jesus and Moses, but rather on their spiritual journeys and transformations. Lastly, we have the skeptics. They question the literal interpretation of these biblical events, suggesting that these stories are allegorical or metaphorical, rather than historical accounts. From this perspective, the question of whether Jesus and Moses went into ketosis becomes less relevant, as the focus shifts to the lessons and messages embedded in these narratives. As you can see, the question of whether Jesus and Moses went into ketosis during their time in the desert is one that invites a wide range of responses. It's a question that bridges the gap between history, religion, and science, offering a unique opportunity for interdisciplinary dialogue and exploration. These theories give us much to think about, don't they? Each perspective offers a unique lens through which to view this fascinating question, and there's certainly no shortage of food for thought here. So we've explored the historical context, understood what ketosis is, and looked at various theories. We journeyed back in time to when Moses and Jesus wandered the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. We delved into the historical backdrop, the hardships, the fasting, and the spiritual significance. We pondered over the question, did they ever go into a state of ketosis during this time of intense fasting and minimal sustenance? Then we jumped right into the science of it all, shedding light on the process of ketosis. We learned that when our bodies are deprived of carbohydrates for a certain length of time, they begin to burn fat for energy, resulting in the production of ketones. It's a survival mechanism, a fascinating adaptation that has allowed humans to endure periods of scarcity since time immemorial. We also explored various theories and interpretations, both religious and scientific. Some suggest that the heightened mental clarity and reduced physical hunger associated with ketosis could have contributed to their spiritual experiences. Others propose that the physical hardships endured during these 40 days and nights were a test of faith and resilience rather than a biological process. But the beauty of this discussion lies in its openness. The fact that it's a question without a definitive answer, a mystery that continues to spark curiosity and debate. It's a fascinating intersection of faith and science, of the spiritual and the physical, of the known and the unknown. So now, we turn the question over to you. What do you think? Could Jesus and Moses have gone into ketosis during their 40 days and nights in the desert? Could this physiological process have played a role in their experiences? Or do you believe that it was purely a spiritual journey unaffected by the physical state of their bodies? What do you think? Could Jesus and Moses have gone into ketosis? We invite you to share your thoughts and join this fascinating discussion in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. God bless y'all.